Eagles Entertainment.
The journey of the draft is driven by AAA. AAA Roadside is their strong side. Make AAA a part of your game day today. AAA, go ahead.
With the 21st pick in the NFL Draft, the Philadelphia Eagles select...
You're listening to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Welcome to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA. I'm your host, Fran Duffy. We've got a loaded show today. At the very top of the show, we've got Mr. Relevant. Ross Tucker is going to join the show. You guys all are familiar with Ross Tucker. You can follow him on Twitter at Ross Tucker NFL. He's the Eagles color analyst for the preseason, does a whole host of other media gigs. You can catch him on the Ross Tucker Football Podcast. He's going to join the show. We're going to talk all about this part of the pre-draft process for these prospects coming out of college. So we'll talk all about that with Ross, as well as a few players he's got some hot takes on in Mr. Relevant. After that, Chris McPherson, Ben Fennell, and I go through Draft Buzz. We've got Pick 6, really fun category this week. 6 players with pro comparisons that we love. We'll hit on that in Pick 6, and then some questions from you at home in our draft mailbag. Before we get into the rest of the show, quick reminder once again, if you haven't yet, go on to PhiladelphiaEagles.com/journey survey. Fill out a quick 4 to 5 minute survey, just all about content. It's all trying to make this show better moving forward, not just into the fall of 2020, but beyond that. So whatever you like, whatever you don't like, you can share that with us on our survey. You can go again, PhiladelphiaEagles.com/journey survey, or you can go right onto your phone, wherever you're listening to the show. You can go into the episode description. You can go onto my Twitter feed at FDuffy3. I tweet the link out there as well. So wherever you listen, if you have a chance to go on and fill out that survey, really appreciate the help from all of you that have done that. All right, let's get to the top of the show. It's time now for Mr. Relevant.
It's time for Mr. Relevant.
Well, excited to welcome back to the show a guy who really doesn't need an introduction. If you listen to the show, you know Ross Tucker, who is just recently announced to just signed an extension to be the Eagles color commentator for preseason broadcasts. Ross, welcome back to the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Fran, my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. You know me, man. Anything I can do, anything Eagles related, anything with the Eagles, I'm all over it. And obviously beyond fired up to do the preseason games the next few years, at least. Kind of crazy how many guys that played in the preseason games last year ended up making big plays for the Eagles in December to get them a division championship.
Yeah, it was you could go back to your calls from preseason game 2 and preseason game 4, and you could have just cut and paste and put them into week 16, week 15, and it would have worked just fine. But Ross, we're also going to have you on for Eagles Draft Central in April, which will be a lot of fun. Excited to have you in studio for that week of action in April for draft weekend. So excited to dive into deeper into this class with you here in a few weeks. But before we talk about some players here, I want to ask you just about this process, this point of the process right now. And obviously, look, it's going to get impacted a little bit, I would imagine, by what's going on in the world with coronavirus and everything. But look, all these guys, all these prospects, they're all on the road constantly right now, right? I mean, you've got not just your pro day, but private workouts you're doing all over the country. You're doing the private visits, the top 30 visits with teams. What is that like, as a prospect? And you're coming off the combine. You weren't at the combine, but just kind of speak to what's going on with all these guys right now at this point in the process.
Yeah, so there's really 3 different things. There's the pro day, there's the private workouts, and there's the top 30 visits. And they really all serve different purposes in my mind. The pro day, you're still looking to improve upon your testing marks, physical testing numbers from the combine if you feel like you need to do better in a certain area, or if you're one of the guys that wasn't invited to the combine. And it's kind of amazing to me, Fran, to look at the fact, I think it was 337 guys that were invited to the combine, and yet I can name guys, I follow Penn State pretty closely. I mean, Steven Gonzalez started 4 years at left guard for them. Jan Johnson the last couple of years at middle linebacker for them. Both guys I would expect to at least get into camps, and yet they weren't invited to the combine. That's pretty much every school, right? So the pro day is vitally important for the prospects that were not invited to the combine. Probably lesser so for the guys that were at the combine. Then you'll have the private workouts. And the difference between the private workouts and the pro day is the pro day is completely designed by the player or the school themselves for the most part. And so they can script things the way they want. They can choose to, I'm going to participate in this, I'm not going to do that drill, etc. Whereas the private workouts, I can speak to this. Every team has different unique drills they're going to want to put you through. So I can remember way back when, Fran, 2001 in Princeton, we had several offensive line coaches come to work out myself and my teammate Dennis Norman, who went on to play 9 years in the NFL. And whether it was Mike Tice from the Vikings or, Frank Verducci from the Bengals, they had different specific things they wanted to see, specific drills they wanted to put you through that was important to them when they were evaluating prospects. So much more specific, much more drill work that they do with their players and have an idea of what they're looking for. Then if they bring you in for an actual visit to the facility, that's usually more about getting to know you more from a character standpoint and your football intelligence. When you go to an NFL team like the Eagles, they can't work you out at that point. So it's really more about just getting to know you, getting comfortable with you. Sometimes it's guys that have had off the field issues that they want to get more clarity on. Sometimes it's guys that they want to get a really good feel for how much football they know. But really all three things that are going on right now, pro day, private workouts, and these top 30 visit, private meetings, they're all really different and serve different purposes.
Yeah, and I think one big important part that you kind of take away from that too is, I think you see websites all over the place, right, all over the media sphere that are tracking visits and tracking workouts. Just because a team works out a player or just because a team has a guy come in for a top 30, yeah, there's interest, but we have no idea how that visit goes. We have no idea how that workout went. We have no idea what happens at those things. So coming out of that, the team may feel like, yeah, that guy, we're not drafting that guy, or we can't take this guy here. Like, we have no idea what happens in those instances. So it's still tough to kind of peg, like, all right, like this team is interested in player X, Y, or Z.
It's a great point, Fran. I had a pretty good idea from some of my private workouts. I had a pretty good idea that I was not going to be going to Mike Tyson, the Vikings. He did not seem overly impressed with my direction. On the flip side, I could tell that Frank Verducci and the Bengals really liked me. So, you never know. It's like anything else in life. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. I still remember getting a call from the Bengals in the first round of that draft. I'm sitting there watching the draft. I have like 3 phones in front of me. My parents had just gotten me my first cell phone. I had my dorm room phone, and the Bengals called and said, "Hey, we just want to let you know that we've got you high on our list as a free agent for after the draft." But I mean, I knew I wasn't going in the first round, but it's still cool to get called by a team in the first round. So that's my story. I'm sticking with it.
Well, that's a story that you have that I am not able to share, unfortunately, Ross. But let's talk about some players that that you've had a chance to be able to see either up close or just doing some film study on some of these guys. And I know one team you've gotten a chance to watch has been Oklahoma. You've seen them a couple times. I want to ask you about CeeDee Lamb. What are your thoughts on CeeDee Lamb? Considered by most to be, if not the number 1 receiver, the number 2 receiver in this draft. How do you view him and how he projects to the NFL?
He is an extremely rare and gifted player. And I say that, Fran, because most guys are not exceptional in as many areas as he is exceptional. He is an unbelievable contested catch, boundary receiver, ridiculous body control and hands that almost make you think of a guy like a DeAndre Hopkins. I'm not going to say he's quite on that level, but he makes some catches. I think he even made one, at the combine where you're just like, how does he contort his body and have that kind of body control to be able to catch that? But the thing that I think separates him is what he does with the ball in his hands. You wouldn't think he's 6'1", a $190 when you watch him run in the open field. Having watched him on TV the first couple of years, I kind of thought he was like Hollywood Brown and was a more slender, smaller guy who could just really run like Marquise Hollywood Brown, who the Ravens took in the first round last year. But then you look at him up close and he's a good sized guy. I mean, he's like 6'1", $190, like I said, but his run after the catch ability is out of this world. He has a subtle way of setting up blocks, has ridiculous vision, and he's got this weird ability, Fran, to like throttle down like 30 yards downfield and then speed up again and then relax for a little bit so this guy passes you and then turn it on again. And so that's why I say he's so rare, is because I have a tough time thinking of that many guys who combine both ridiculous body control and hands at the catch point with elite run after the catch ability. You know, on some level, one guy came to mind for me was sort of like a Dez Bryant early in his career, when Dez was so good at the contested catches and so good in the end zone and on the sideline, yet when you gave Dez a slant, he was able to make some things happen. I think CeeDee Lamb's actually more dynamic than Dez Bryant is with the ball in his hands, but he is a truly unique receiver. I don't know that everything he does is always orthodox. You know, he's not quite the route runner that Jerry Jeudy is. It seems like some of the stuff he does out there is just kind of freelancing it, but it absolutely works. He's an incredible football player.
Well, let's go into the trenches here, a position that's near and dear to your heart, obviously, along the offensive line. One of the tackles that I feel like is, at one point he was under the radar, and he's getting a little bit more buzz now, I feel, is Josh Jones, the Houston left tackle. Got to see him up close down at the Senior Bowl. Struggled early, bounced back, and then had a really strong rest of the week after that Tuesday practice. So excited to get your thoughts on Josh Jones, the Houston left tackle.
So I saw Houston play in person this year. I called their games for Westwood One Radio against both Oklahoma and Washington State. So I saw Josh twice. And what's interesting about him is they didn't have a lot of returning starters on the offensive line. He wasn't really that highly touted. You know, I watched him, Fran, but nobody said, hey, you got to look at this guy, or this guy's a potential first-round pick. He kind of came out of nowhere. But I can tell you what he is, and what he is he's a really nice athlete. He's smooth, he's patient, he's got good feet, really like him as a pass protector. You try to spin back inside, he's all over it. He works up to the second level extremely well, just moves very well for a guy his size. He, at times, is a little bit raw, but he's had 5 different offensive line coaches. And I can speak to this from experience, having 9 offensive line coaches during my time in the NFL, that it really makes it difficult for you to master any one skill set, because usually offensive line coaches have a different, unique way that they want you to do it. So it's unfortunate if you're a guy that has a bunch of them like I did and like Josh Jones has had, because it doesn't really allow you to master any one group of skills that a certain coach wants you to have. So I would imagine that there are some offensive line coaches that watch him and think, man, really nice feet, really smooth, second level pass pro. He's probably not a great point of attack run blocker. Part of that, Dana Holgorsen came in. Even before Dana Holgorsen, they were throwing the ball over the place. So he might never be that, but that's not as important as it used to be. And I think there's some offensive line coaches that are going to think, man, if I get him for 4 or 5 years, I'm going to really be able to do things with him, because he hasn't gotten great coaching or had any consistency in that area.
It's a great point. He's a guy that I feel like, we saw a couple Senior Bowl offensive linemen last year kind of sneak into round 1, right? We saw Chris Lindstrom go in the top 15 out of Boston College. We saw Caleb McGarry go towards the end. We saw Titus Howard go towards the end of round 1. So it would not shock me if Josh Jones was a little bit higher than people are anticipating right now, especially because of how good this tackle class is at the top. I wonder if there's just going to be that run and a team towards the back end of round 1 says, man, if we need a tackle, if we want one, we got to take one. And I wonder if Josh Josh Jones could be that guy. So certainly an interesting name to watch. And then one last player I wanted to ask you about, just because I know you've got some pretty strong takes on him, is the Utah State quarterback, Jordan Love. We're going to talk a lot about the quarterback position today on the show. We'll talk about Tua and Herbert. Excited to get your thoughts on Love and just how you view him making that jump to the NFL.
Yeah, and I'll start, Fran, with the caveat that I won't pretend to be a quarterback guru. Okay? I will say this, though. I called the Wake Forest game after Utah State played them, and I called an Air Force game after Utah State played them. So I watched every snap of his from 2 games. First of all, the guy really does have a truly unique arm and an ability to flick his wrist even when he's not set in the pocket and have it go a long way. That said, I mean, Fran, he threw 3 picks against Wake Forest and at least 3 other times threw the ball right to Wake Forest defenders who just dropped it. Justin Sternad, a linebacker I really like, dropped at least one. They had a corner who dropped. I mean, he threw it right. Easily could have been a 5 or 6 interception game. Then you get to Air Force. They scored 7 points against Air Force. Now I know that Air Force.
Was that the Muckfest? Was that like that crazy downpour game?
I don't think so. I mean, I'd have to go back.
A game, yeah.
From watching the tape. I know Air Force does a nice job with time of possession and controlling the football, but still, Air Force is not blessed with a lot of gifted athletes in the secondary. And so watching them only score 7 points, you combine those 2 things. I would be very leery of taking Jordan Love as high as some of these guys are now saying. He's going to be the 3rd quarterback off the board, going to go top 10. Wow. I mean, you get a lot of confidence in A, his physical ability, and B, your ability to coach things out of him if you take him in the top 10. That would be way, way too much risk for me.
Yeah, he's a guy I think it's going to be a very interesting case study just because of the circumstances around him, all the turnover offensively, not just from a personnel standpoint, but coaching staff-wise as well. They all went to Texas Tech, so he's completely surrounded by a bunch of new faces there this past year and certainly was pressing. I watched that Wake Forest game on TV that night. It was opening week. Definitely struggled in that game, so interested to see where he ultimately ends up in this draft. Well, Ross, excited to dig into this with you a little bit deeper, man, once we get to draft weekend. Congrats again on re-signing here with the Eagles as their color commentator for preseason broadcasts. We'll be sure to hear from you later this summer as well, but we'll talk to you again soon here in a few weeks. Thanks again for joining us on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.
Now it's time for Draft Buzz.
All right, great stuff there from Ross. And guys, as I welcome in Chris McPherson and Ben Fennell, let's get into Draft Buzz. And through the grapevine, some big news coming through the NFL late on Tuesday. CMAC, the compensatory picks have finally been announced by the NFL. The Eagles get 3 extra picks, 1 in the 3rd round, 2 in the 4th round. Some big news there to close out Tuesday.
The biggest thing is the Eagles have prepared all offseason as if they were going to have 10 selections, okay? They've gone through the formula. They predicted from past years. They figured that in 2019, they didn't go into the free agent market because they said they knew they were going to have some big-ticket players leave in Nick Foles, in Jordan Hicks, in Golden Tate, and they figured, you know what? We're going to get those draft picks back in 2020, and we're going to cash in because we need to remake the roster in a younger form. Howie Roseman has preached that. The Eagles now officially have their 10 selections. So the big thing now is what is Howie Roseman going to do to retool the roster? That's what's going to be so fun. I think we've all known that they were likely going to have 10 picks. Now that they have them, how are they going to be deployed come draft weekend?
Yeah, it's exciting to have those picks. It's not like they're 7th or 6th round selections.
No.
I mean, an extra 3 and 2 extra 4s, good ammo going into a draft that it's pretty deep. I mean, you get a lot of those mid-round selections. Ben, I know you and I were talking last week about, I'd love to have a bunch of picks, 2nd round, 3rd round, 4th round in this draft. It's a deep class overall.
10 picks, over, under, push. How many are the Eagles making?
That's a good question. It's always tough because you know that they're always going to be wheeling and dealing. They're going to move up. They're going to move down. Different points of the draft. They're always going to be, trying to figure out different ways to shape that roster. I'm going to go push. I'm going to go with an even 10.
You even 10?
Yeah.
I'll go under. I'm going to say like 8 comes to mind.
All right.
I think they're going to make some moves. So.
I was actually thinking the over.
Yeah,
and
I can
thinking
see the
maybe
over.
getting out and stockpiling a couple extra ones
Okay.
on
Yeah.
day 2 or day 3.
I'll explain a little bit later in the show. I'll kind of get into
Ooh.
why
All
I
right.
think it could be the under.
All right, interesting. All right, well, let's get to some of the big news of the week. And Tua Tagovailoa, this came out on Monday from Steve Weiss from NFL Network, cleared his 4-month medical check last week and has begun some light drills. He's dropping back, he's throwing, he's doing some slight running. Tua's doctor said that the outlook can only be looked at as positive at this point, as it can be a 4-month mark, but he's got several weeks, if not longer, before he's able to do some real working out. So obviously still a lot that needs to be done. Very conservative right now with the way that they're going to treat the rehab process. But look, we're going to continue talking about this because it's going to be big news for the first round of this draft. And certainly for if you're an Eagles fan, you want all this medical stuff to come out as positively as possible to ensure that he goes in the top 20 picks.
I feel like at this point, unless there's something disastrous, he's going high.
Yep.
There's been nothing to this point that makes me feel that anything is going to change. You've seen every mock, and he's still high on everyone's big board. And we're going to talk about Daniel Jeremiah in a little bit because there's some injuries I think have kind of shaped some changes there. So to me, all signs point to as long as the teams clear him medically, which is really the most important hurdle. It's great. Tua's doctor can say what he wants.
Yeah.
Tua's doctor can say, he's going to go walk on water tomorrow.
But that's what gives me pause because every year we see this with guys like last year, no one knew Jawan Taylor had that knee that was, and this is very much in the spotlight, but Jawan Taylor was in the top 15 of every mock draft, top 20 of every mock draft.
True.
He goes to the second round. Miles Jack a couple years ago, he was in the top 5, top 10 of every mock draft. He goes early second round. The kid, the Michigan defensive tackle was 2 years ago that he was a first round pick for everybody.
Maurice Hurst, yeah.
Maurice Hurst. He ends up going in the 4th round. So the medical stuff it's just a little bit hairy, a little bit prickly. It still scares me a little bit that maybe he does not go in that top 20.
With Tua, I just want to know, is he preparing himself for the pro day or is he preparing himself to be ready for rookie camp for a team?
I think he said he's planning on doing a workout. I believe it was April 4th.
It seems like they're gearing up for pro day. This is almost like a hurry up to wait type of thing. Let me hurry up to the pro day to then kind of shut it down. And it's like, don't rush through this process. I know you want to show off to the scouts and prove your draft stock.
Yeah.
There's still a really good chance he's not ready to play as a rookie in the NFL.
Right, no question.
And there's also a team that may say, if there's any sort of issue or, still kind of developing through the injury, shut it down and let's make sure you're an asset for the future, which he obviously is.
Yeah, and the thing that scares me too when we talk about this situation and when we're talking about how many quarterbacks could go in the top 20 of this draft, if you are the Chargers, the Dolphins, the Bucks, depending on how free agency goes, all these all these teams, you throw them into a bucket. And you have a choice between Tua, where you're like, I'm not really sure, and that's even taking apart the film evaluation part. We don't know how teams have felt through the interviews and the film, but you've got Tua, where you're not really sure, versus Justin Herbert, who's a high floor guy. You've got Jordan Love, who's got that great high ceiling. I don't know, you might lean more towards those guys if you're not quite sure about if he's able to come back from this injury.
The thing for Tua is financially, there's a big difference between being possibly the 2nd or 3rd overall pick and being a mid to late first round pick.
Yep.
So that's probably from his standpoint and his camp standpoint why he's going to want to get out there and prove that he's ready to go sooner than later. Because if everything else checks out, he should be a top 5 pick. Mm-hmm. This is the only, and it's a very significant hurdle, but it's really the only major one that it seems that he has to cross to this point.
I expect the medicals to get even deeper once a team actually claims him and owns him as well.
Yeah.
Owns him's a bad word, but signs him, because it's a very unique injury. It was a trauma injury. It was a trauma surgery.
Right. Yeah.
This wasn't a typical sports injury done by a sports doctor, an ACL. You go to a team and they've seen 1,000 ACLs to compare and to know the development, the progress. It's a little bit uncharted. It's a different type of injury. Modern medicine is crazy that the fact that he's up on his feet and preparing for a pro day in a month. But obviously it's something a little bit uncharted in the sports injury sphere.
Just as we're looking at this, I'm almost looking at my watch now that it's March 11th. It's almost like if Tua slips, you should go back and clip the part that you said, that
Right.
every year there is someone who falls that we don't see it coming.
Yeah, every year it happens, and it's we just don't know. It goes back to that old axiom of it only takes one. It only takes one team to say, "Yep, we're good with it. Let's go. Let's pull the trigger." But we'll see. It's going to be very interesting, certainly, to follow that. And speaking of Tua, he was one of a handful of players that Ben Solak, friend of the show for the Draft Network, listed in an article over the weekend that titled biggest boom or bust prospects in the 2020 NFL Draft. There were like 4 or 5 guys that Ben highlighted in that piece. Another guy he hit on was Penn State wide receiver KJ Hamler. So I just kind of wanted to open up to us. Let's kind of talk. This is a player that Eagles fans are really, really in tune with. They're certainly a target for a lot of Eagles fans. So let's talk about KJ Hamler and why he's viewed as a boom or bust type of player.
I would think that the boom part is obviously the dynamic speed and playmaking ability. I don't think there's any question about that. Now, conversely, the size. And is he going to hold up at the next level? And is he as refined as you bring up a Deshaun Jackson? Is he refined to that level that he'll be able to persevere at the next level? So speed is certainly going to open the door and get you drafted pretty darn high. How high in Hamler's case, it remains to be seen. It would have been great if he worked out in Indianapolis to really kind of cement his stock the way some of the other players did. But I think that's probably what you're looking at least from my perspective, from the boom or bust profile.
There's 4'3", 180-pound receivers in every draft.
Right.
We know he can run. Now we need to figure out if he can play receiver in the NFL kind of thing. And, we don't remember the Clyde Gateses of the world, but we remember the Deshaun Jacksons and Taylor Gabriels and ones
John
that have found roles in the NFL. But every year there's these types of profiles that have a little bit of issues with running NFL route trees, have a little bit of issues with making catches with NFL corners on their back. And some of the things we had issues with KJ Hamler at Penn State and catching the underneath stuff on third down, the tight window stuff, the nuanced route running. He's not going to have the big open spaces, in the NFL on a down-to-down basis. And that's kind of my concern. He's electric fast. He's every bit of a 4-3 player, in and out of breaks, the whole deal, taking the top off. But does he have an NFL acclimate to kind of win and move the chains? And
see, I think he's got a lot of twitch coming out of routes. Like you see the explosiveness, you see that just that raw power coming out of a break. But and I think that does he need to clean things up as a route runner? Sure. Drop issues to me, it's like some of the gimmies he's got to be able to hit. But I do think he can make the spectacular catch. I think he can track the ball over his shoulder. I've seen him do it. I'd like to see a little bit more of it. He wasn't quite used to that extent. That was the thing about Deshaun was, coming out of Cal, I mean, he could track that deep ball like nobody's business. Mm-hmm. And then we talked about the baseball background and all that stuff. But I think when you look at KJ Hamler, tools are there. The size is a concern, and the drops you want to see, kind of tighten those up. But I'm excited about him moving on to the next level.
He's like a 3 for 120 type of receiver in the NFL. He's more of a Taylor Gabriel than any sort of possession receiver.
Yeah.
But he has some routes that he's just so electric getting in and out of breaks. You think he could be a third down slot for you. I just don't think that's going to be his profile. I think he'll be more of what Calvin Ridley has turned into for the Falcons, which they're disappointed that they spent a first-round pick on a guy that's not making the tough catches for him on third down. He's really just a double move, deep threat, down the field guy, which is okay.
Sure.
If that's what you do, you show up with 3 for 120 and a touchdown on Sunday, that's a good day right there.
Sure.
Just trying to figure out what else can you do, and then where does that value put you in the draft?
Sure. Well, let's get into the next segment here in our film room recap. And Ben, there's a guy that you know what? Actually, let's keep talking receivers here. The guy that I'm going to bring up is going to be Denzel Mims, a guy I know you've done again recently. He's one of the darlings, I think, of draft Twitter for what he's done in the pre-draft process. Was productive over the course of his career at Baylor. Was a decorated high school player, great track athlete coming out of high school. And then when he goes to the Senior Bowl, had a good week in Mobile. Had a great combine. He ran 4.38 at 215 pounds. He's over 6'3". He's got crazy length. Checking a lot of boxes for Denzel Mims. I went back. I'm going to be honest. It took me time. We talked about this a couple weeks ago, C-Mac, about like how there are certain guys where it takes you a little bit of time before you like come all the way around. I don't know if I'm all the way around on Mims. I was definitely lower than everybody else, coming through the process. I watched all of his targets this morning from the 2019 season. And I think what you see with him, I think it's similar in a lot of ways to DK Metcalf in that he's got that size. He certainly does have long speed. I don't know if he always plays to 4.38. I'll tell you where he stands out to me. Like his body control, his ball skills, his ability to make just ridiculous freak show catches along the sideline. That is where he stands out. Like going up and winning at the catch point, reeling in passes away from his frame. I don't think he had a drop on a throw that was outside of his framework. Like he was excellent on those kinds of throws. Keep him outside the numbers. Let him work downfield. Back shoulder fades. I think all that stuff. He's able to adjust the ball in the air. He's really, really impressive in that arena.
I feel like there was a lot of guys that had great workouts in Indy. It's just such a deep receiver class. There wasn't like time to hit all the conversations.
Right.
He ran 4.38 and jumped out the building, and like a Joe Reed too at Virginia. Ran 4.44 and jumped really well and looked good. And it's like. Yep. I just got to his tape yesterday. Just such a deep receiver group. But Mims, love his play personality, the blocking, the catch point stuff, working the sideline. Occasionally had a boneheaded drop or two.
Had a couple of those.
But he also had some ridiculously, impressive plays, at the catch point and contested catches and high points and 50-50 balls and red zone. And the other issue was the route tree at Baylor. Yep. Which showed up to the Senior Bowl, had a little bit more press coverage, and seemed to have a lot of nuance and kind of more of an NFL route tree.
Him getting off press was a concern I had, going through the film. I'll tell you what, I thought through his senior year, he showed a little bit more nuance as a route runner, a little bit more snap coming in and out of breaks as the year went on. And I thought, I'm still going through the Senior Bowl stuff, going back through it. He had a good week when we were down there, seemed like watching him live. He was a guy that stood out to us when we watched him down there. But just going back and watching all the snaps, I was pretty impressed with what I saw from Denzel Mims. He's going to be a really fascinating player. I mean, it seems like he's getting a buzz now where second round, potential late round one. I mean, that's kind of where the buzz seems right now from a media standpoint on Denzel Mims.
Well, if you look at DK Metcalf, the key is going to be for whatever team drafts him to know how to use him.
Right.
To play to his strengths. That's the biggest thing more than anything else. If you know what he can do on tape and see what he can do on tape, don't force him to be something that he's not.
Yeah, he tracks the ball well over his shoulder. Like let him work vertically. He can win on a slant. I don't like him in the middle of the field, like the shallow crosses, the deep digs, like where he feels like there's contact coming in traffic. I don't like him there as much. Let him work outside the numbers and go up and make those crazy catches. He's got the ability to do that at a very high level. Ben, you looked at a player on the other side of the ball.
Spin it to the other side. Another guy who showed out in Indy, just there wasn't enough room for the conversation.
Another Senior Bowl guy, too.
Yeah, and you look at these numbers, a 6'1 corner, 200 pounds, running 4.44, jumping 36 inches, 11-foot broad, 22 reps on the bench from a corner. I mean, this is checking every box from the measurables. And I don't think we called his name once in Indy. And that's Reggie Robinson, the second out of Tulsa. Big corner. And when you're talking corners that are 6 foot, 200 pounds, running under a 4.5.
Okay, what do we got here?
And jumping at least 10.5 broad.
Okay.
There's 3 corners. Jeffrey Okudah, C.J. Henderson, and Reggie Robinson.
Wow.
Big, fast, physical, explosive. He is the day 2 version of Jeffrey Okudah, in my opinion.
Have you done historically the guys that have matched
I have
that?
not yet.
I know you're big in the.
But obviously, the Trayvon Diggs of the world in this class, and then just converting it to is he a Jimmy Smith type of corner, that type of size, speed combination. But he checks all the boxes. It reminds me a lot of James Bradbury.
Okay.
Coming out of Samford.
He was Samford, yeah.
Carved out a nice role at the Carolina Panthers, looking for a big payday in free agency right now. Big corner, can play press. Really more of a zone corner, though. He uses his physicality, good ball skills, big frame, the whole deal. The only thing is he's just a little bit grabby at times. He had 8 penalties this past year, Reggie Robinson. But tons of ball production, 34 PBUs, 4 picks, 4 block kicks, which you love to see on special teams.
Sure.
2,500 snaps, 41 games played, tons of experience on the field. The special teams value. Watch him this past year against Tylan Wallace, Oklahoma State. Pretty much locked him up. Gabriel Davis, UCF.
Right.
James Prochet at SMU. Great battles against NFL caliber receivers, and I thought he showed up every week. I have written down Aqib Talib, Michael Jackson from Miami last year.
Yep, right.
Big physical corner that
ran
ran well.
Yeah.
But he's a guy that just caught in the wash of kind of a deep group at corner, but he checks all the boxes, and I just think on a different year, we may be talking about him as kind of a round one type of corner with that size and that speed. I mean, this is exactly what NFL DCs want on the outside for him.
Here's a guy I still haven't done Robinson yet, and I'm hoping to get to him. I'm going to get to him before the draft, but I'm hoping to get to him relatively soon. C-Mac, do you remember anything from seeing him live down in Mobile? I feel like there were plays that he made, but
Nothing's
it
coming to
seems like so far gone now. He's a guy I know there's been a lot of buzz about, and I'm excited to kind of dig into his film, certainly before
I
draft
just love
weekend.
when it's highlight plays you put on. Press coverage, off coverage,
Right.
a bail coverage, a cover 2, a cover 3.
So scheme versatility.
Like just a little bit of variety in everything. You could see
Yep.
that flash that you
like
can kind
that.
of fit in any sort of scheme for you.
I like that.
Very much the way James Bradbury has kind of carved out in Carolina, which was more of a zone team the past couple
Sure,
years,
right.
but a big corner that can survive in man,
Yep.
good run defender, force player as well. Just a guy I think you don't have to take off the field. He's a big physical corner you just want. Look at the way Stephon Gilmore's carved out a
Right.
defensive player of the year role for the Patriots.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
that type of corner.
Very interesting profile comparison to Bradbury. Big kid, small school
Yep.
corner, went to the Senior Bowl, made a name for himself, turned into a mid-round pick, and obviously a future NFL
He's
starter.
looking to cash in about $15 million a year here in free agency.
No
Yeah.
question. All right, let's get to our next segment here. Our big board breakdown. We're going to go Daniel Jeremiah released his most updated top 50 list for NFL.com on Monday. C-Mac, what was your big takeaway from the top 50?
8 receivers in the top 50. You know, we're talking about this deep wide receiver class. You talked just about Mims a moment ago. He cracked the top 50 for the first time. And again, he's done everything right in the pre-draft process with the Senior Bowl week, the great combine workout. One note, Brandon Ayuk, player who we wanted to see at the Senior Bowl,
Yep.
you know, didn't do much in Indy, dropped 7 spots, number 27. So it's interesting whether that's injury, whether it's going back to watch the tape. You know, those are some of the things that are very intriguing. Another player, this might be more injury-related, Laviska Shenault goes down 12 spots to 36, but still, overall, just a very, very deep wide receiver group.
The narrative, like he didn't look good in Indy, Chenault.
I mean, he didn't. He ran the 40, and that was that. And he didn't do anything else after that. So,
Right.
And then he thought he was having core muscle surgery.
yeah, and then he's having the surgery. So, you know, it's been a little bit of a rough pre-draft
It's
process.
not that like
for
his
Laviska
narrative
Shenault.
is dropping. It's just almost like other guys have kind of jumped him.
I was
and
just
stuff.
going to say, like,
He's staying
if other
here.
guys are going up,
Yeah.
then somebody's got to
No.
go down on these lists. Like,
And that's purely the conversation meter type
Right.
of thing. You know, his tape is his tape.
Right.
The season's over.
Absolutely. No, that's a good point there. You had a couple other big risers there from the front seven, C-Mac.
Let's see, going here, linebacker position, Kenneth Murray, who I know you're a big fan of, Fran, looked the part in Indy. Unfortunately, didn't get to do the full workout because he pulled up with an injury.
And he's
but
not participating in Oklahoma's pro day
not
this week.
pro day, so
Yep.
goes up 7 spots to number 22 overall. And here's saw him at the Senior Bowl, Zach Bond, Wisconsin, one of the big risers, going up 9 spots to number 38.
I think Bond's a good player.
I gotta watch his tape again later. I don't know.
He was he's a guy that you feel like you're a little bit lower on.
I don't know what to do with him. It's the same with Josh Uche. Like, I don't know. Everyone's like, oh, you can play him off ball. Like, I guess, maybe. Like,
Right.
I'll watch a Senior Bowl practice and tape and make an assessment, but I'm not into this catch-all will linebacker for undersized edges.
So we had a
You know,
conversation before we jumped on here about both of our processes at this time of the year, where it's like, you know, you dive into more like who are the guys I haven't studied yet. You dive into this is my favorite version of Ben of like, all right, I'm watching guys from Kennesaw State and from like West Georgia.
Well, the
and
draft
New
is such a
York,
crowded
and, like,
space this time of year. I'm just trying to find a way to like differentiate myself. Everybody's talking about the first round picks
Right.
and stuff. Not everybody has that Wingate tape
Right.
or the Canadian tape or whatever.
Well, so like you'll go through guys that you haven't studied yet. I'm going back through some guys and making like second and third passes through just to fine tune my my thoughts on some players. And we were just talking about like, all right, well, what's the thought behind doing both of those? You'll be doing the Zach Bonds and the Antoine Winfields and those guys in a couple weeks, and I'll be getting to Reggie Robinson and
Right.
some of these other guys in a couple weeks. We just kind of reverse roles there. Ben, what's your takeaways
Yeah,
there from
two
DJ?
big notes on DJ. It's nice to see Jeremy Chin make his way into the top 50. Actually has him listed as a linebacker, if I saw that correctly.
Really?
go back.
I have to go back and look at
Yeah.
it. I don't think I noticed that one.
Yeah, I think he was squeezed in at 48 there. And then on the continuing his meteoric rise is Yetur Gross-Matos,
Yeah.
who was unranked, then 38th, and now he's up to, I think, 31 or 32. So we're talking at least a 20-spot jump in the last week or so. A guy that's got a lot of tools, a lot of versatility. And speaking of sleepers, really quick, Will Sunderland. Troy,
Okay.
Oklahoma transfer,
I've got nothing here.
4.46 at his pro day, 4-star, long ball skills, disruptive press experience. Will Sunderland. I'm telling you.
What position is he?
Corner.
He's a corner.
Yeah, but might squeeze into a day 3 player.
All right.
This is just a random throw.
I might as well throw in some of these after I've been watching them,
All right, I like it. Well, my big takeaway was the quarterback discussion. I think when you look at, DJ's always been a big proponent of Jordan Love over Justin Herbert. He did switch them, and on the most recent Move the Sticks podcast, he kind of dove into that a little bit. I listened to it on my drive into work this morning, actually, and he talked about really, the decision making with Jordan Love, not just on the turnovers, but on some other throws where that could have been turnover-worthy throws. He just kind of questions the decision making. That's something that travels with you to the NFL. Creating those turnovers. We've seen that obviously with Jameis Winston, where with Justin Herbert, he just kind of sees them as a high floor player. We talked about floors and ceilings last week. Herbert, higher floor. He'll still maintain Love's got that higher ceiling, but Justin Herbert now up to number 20 on his board, Love to 23. So ultimately, we're splitting hairs. He still has those guys neck and neck on the board, but interesting that he bumped Herbert up above Love.
I'm worried about Herbert. I think he's such an arm talent, and his wow plays almost like make you a little bit drunk on his normal down-to-down evaluation.
Really?
He doesn't see the field particularly well. He's late on reads, late on progressions, doesn't pull the trigger on a lot of stuff,
That's
doesn't
the stuff
show
that worries me with him.
anticipation.
Yep.
He's big, he's strong, and put it over the moon. But if he doesn't have the quick twitch processing, decision-making, that's what NFL throws are about. That's what being quarterback's about is, the mental processing, the ability to get the ball out, the decision making. I'd rather watch Joe Burrow get the ball out on 3rd and 3 to his hot receiver, taking a shot, than watching Justin Herbert throw a dig, 17 yards on a rope.
But see, that's what, when I look at Herbert.
Like how many we always talk about NFL throws. How many NFL throws you have to make on every Sunday? Like an impressive arm talent throw.
Yeah,
how many times do we even see a 21 to 18 comeback in the NFL anymore?
Sure.
Those throws are gone. It's like,
to me, though, when I look at Herbert, I look at that offense. We've talked about this in the show a couple of times because you've seen them live. We've watched them. We've both watched them on tape. I just didn't feel like he was a fit for what they were trying to do offensively.
No.
I'd want him in a, and the problem is I don't know that there are many teams that run this style of offense that are looking for a quarterback in round one, but that Shanahan style of mold of I want him on the move the pocket, play action, well-defined stuff, make it easy for him, let him use that arm, let him use his legs. That's where I want things to be well-defined for Justin Herbert and then let him run.
It's not sexy, but I've written down Matt Schaub.
Right.
I think about him with Kubiak in Houston where he threw for 4,000 yards in
Kubiak
back-to-back
comes
years.
from the Mike Shanahan scheme,
But it's hard to even find plays of Herbert turning his back to the defense on a stretch. But that's the type of system you want him in.
That's what I want. Yeah.
We've seen Joe Flacco play for 10 years and win a Super Bowl. I think Herbert can do that.
Right.
In the right scheme.
Yeah.
But don't throw him the keys and say, let's go with the air raid and throw this thing around the yard.
Yeah, I think that scheme didn't necessarily do him favors in terms of what it's kind of. They're different players. I'm not comparing this guy to this guy.
Just wonder, is he
it's
closer
like
to
Hackenberg at Penn State. When Hackenberg was at Penn State, Hackenberg wasn't like a drop back catch and shoot to throw a bubble screen. That wasn't Christian Hackenberg. That didn't do him any favors.
To get Herbert's full value, are they going to have to run QB power and stuff like they do with Josh Allen? To
Maybe.
get the advantage of his size and legs?
Yeah,
And
I think so. If you look at what he's done in Buffalo the last couple of years, why wouldn't you try and do some of that stuff with Herbert?
If you are a little bit lacking as a passer, whether it is your anticipation, accuracy, whatever it is, touch, do you make up for it with being 6'6" and 240 and
run
with
like
some movement? Yeah,
no question. I think you absolutely do.
Yeah.
No, it's going to be an interesting discussion. And the landing spots with all these guys, we'll be talking about that after the draft. Will be really, really big. All right, let's get to our mock draft roundup here. Josh Norris from Roto World NBC Sports. This is a mock draft from last week, but it was so divisive that I had to squeeze it into the show this week. Takeaways here. He's got the Eagles selecting at number 21, Jalen Reagor, the wide receiver from TCU. Before we get into the rest of this mock here, thoughts on Jalen Reagor at 21?
Exciting player. He's kind of mixed in with a lot of these gadget players in the draft. I think there's values at all different days for these speedy receivers, whether it's Henry Ruggs, Jalen Reagor, or you go to a Devin Duvernay type of slot presence and track star, or Chenault type of player. I was talking about Joe Reed a minute ago from Virginia, similar type of profile. Antonio Gibson, so exciting player at TCU. I don't think he was used properly at TCU. A lot of outside the numbers stuff for being a small, speedy guy. I would like to see a little bit more slot or gadget, or just give him the ball. Just make offense easier, especially with a true freshman quarterback. But fun player. I think that's the type of presence the Eagles offense could use.
Yeah, quarterback play, I think was probably an issue. Probably hurt his
Huge
production,
issue. Yep.
certainly. But, we'll get after it in the red zone. We'll attack the football. So has a dynamic speed. Didn't quite show maybe as much as Indy. His testing wasn't as great maybe as some of the other receivers.
I was watching Jordan Brooks the other day and came across the TCU
Texas
game.
Tech linebacker,
Oh, man, this freshman quarterback at TCU would just throw it to the flat late
I know.
and get these receivers and backs lit up in the flat.
Really bad.
He took some huge shots, Jalen Reagor.
To me, it's almost like the Miles Sanders pick last year in the second round, where I would be really excited about Jalen Reagor in round 1 because that means that Doug Peterson, that offensive staff, are juiced about Jalen Reagor, and knowing what kind of talent he is, man, because there would be people, I guarantee you, if Jalen Reagor was the pick at 21, there would be plenty of analysts to be like, oh, that's a reach, why is he going so early? No, if they're sold on Jalen Reagor at 21, that gets me excited because now it's they have a vision for how they would use him. So that would make me very, very excited for Jalen Reagor.
He's super competitive too.
Yeah. Oh, he's a great kid.
Yep.
I shouldn't say that. I spoke with him for 5 minutes at the combine. Came off really, really well.
He's good in the red zone for his size. He'll go up and go get it. He caught a Hail Mary, I think, as a freshman against SMU at the end of the first half.
Yep. Obviously, he's got the lineage. His dad in the NFL as well.
Of course.
Teams always love that.
I have some disagreements, though, with the first couple picks, though.
Well, let's get into that.
But right before the Eagles, interesting to see Marlon Davidson go to 20 to Jacksonville. I did not see Dallas taking a corner. He's got Trayvon Diggs.
Yep.
I thought they're pounding the table for an interior tackle or a safety.
Yep.
I kind of thought they were set at corner with Awuzie, and obviously Byron Jones is up in the air right now.
But they've drafted. They have Jordan Lewis. They've got a number of
Jordan Lewis
corners.
is a great player. Yeah.
They've got a number of guys that they've got at the corner spot.
They've been in need of some sort of 3-tech for a number of years, a safety presence, outside of J.J. Wilcox and Jeff Heath and that era.
I think that Dallas is an interesting team to watch because they consistently draft for need, almost all, especially in the top 3 rounds, they draft for need. So depending on how the free agency goes for them, you can kind of pigeonhole, all right, here are 3 or 4 guys that you can kind of earhole for who they're going to take there in round 1 at 17 overall. The other 4 picks that Josh had going, Atlanta at 16 taking Kayvon Chasen. Seems like he's just getting he's consistently in the top 20 of mock drafts, it seems, the pass rusher
and to the Falcons.
From LSU to Atlanta too, which is interesting to me, and my takeaway was that usually you hear the analogy of all right, if a player busts for a team, that it's you get scorned by an ex-girlfriend. You're going to go for you used to date the blonde, now you're going to go find the brunette. If they had the bust with Vic Beasley, are you going to go back to another undersized athletic pass rusher in a Kayvon Chasen as opposed to a guy who's big power leverage player like an AJ Epinesa? I think that's kind of an interesting fit there. He fits the style of what Atlanta typically has wanted. But would they go back to that style of player after they just failed with
They have
Beasley?
a lot of needs, too. They have Grady Jarrett. They have Tack McKinley.
Yep.
Their D-line might still be one of their better position groups.
Yeah.
Do you keep bolstering that? We see teams like San Fran go back to that well, and obviously show me 4 guys that can rush the passer. I'll show you 4 guys that can cover.
Right.
That old kind of adage. So,
Sure.
They could go a lot of different directions.
Well, you got Dallas going Trevon Diggs, as you mentioned, Ben. Miami taking Jordan Love at 18. CeeDee Lamb falling to the Las Vegas Raiders at 19. Marlon Davidson going number 20 to Jacksonville. C-Mac, what was your takeaway from that group?
Going back to our early discussion about the over-under on Eagles draft picks. Okay, the pick actually before Atlanta was Henry Ruggs goes to the Denver Broncos at 15, and all the mocks seem to
seems to be a popular floor.
Drew Lock getting a top-tier wide receiver target to grow with. If the Eagles have all this extra ammunition, and they say, obviously, again, we talked about the 8 receivers in the top 50 of the big board, but if they feel that one is the cream of the crop and is sliding into those early teens, and that Denver is that spot where that will probably end, you wonder if the Eagles might package some of those picks to move up. And the trade that I looked up earlier was the Steelers last year going up to get Devin Bush, using a first, a second, and a third to go from 20 to 10.
It's a lot of picks.
It's a lot, but if you believe that this guy is the guy, okay, that's the thing, is everyone might say, well, it's a deep class of receiver, just wait and get a receiver. But they're individual people, they're individual talents.
Yeah.
You have a specific scheme and offense that you're trying to execute. If you say this guy is the best fit, we need to have him at all costs, you've got this extra ammo to possibly make a move. That's why I wonder if there's the chance that when we talk about the Eagles having 10 picks, All right, do they maybe have maybe a little bit fewer just because maybe there's a guy that they target to say, and I'm not just saying receiver, could be somewhere else in a draft, could be another position even in the first round, but maybe there's a spot that they say, we've got this ammo, let's go get our guy.
Well, that's why also I feel that the quarterback discussion, that's why I keep in, there might be Eagles fans out there that say, why do we keep talking about Herbert and Tua and Love? If those quarterbacks are still on the board in the early teens, let's say that, we talked about DJ's mock draft. He had Herbert falling to 23, and in this mock, Jordan Love is still available. Like, if Jordan Love is still on the board at 18, trading up to above 15 is going to be very difficult because the price is going to be higher with those quarterbacks on the board. Regardless of who those teams are talking to, the price is going to be an extra one. You're going back to what Kansas City had to give up for Mahomes, what Houston had to give up for Deshaun Watson. Like, that's the price that teams will be saying, like, okay, you want to come up with all these quarterbacks on the board. That's the going rate right now. So I think that the quarterback, if you're an Eagles fan, again, you're hoping, like, Chargers, Panthers, Dolphins at 5 overall, like all those, the Bucks early on, like you need the quarterbacks to go very early, especially if you want the Eagles to make a move to get up, because that will then lower that asking price. In my mind, anyway, I would imagine that the asking price to move up will be a little bit lower once all those quarterbacks are off the board. The 5 after Philadelphia, Buffalo 22, taking AJ Epinesa. I mentioned him earlier. Jerry Jeudy going number 23 to New England. We'll talk about that in a second. New Orleans taking Jeff Gladney, the TCU corner, at 24. Minnesota taking Utah corner Jalen Johnson at 25. We haven't talked much about Jalen Johnson. And then Austin Jackson, the left tackle from USC, going number 26. I'll tell you what.
Lamb before Jeudy love.
Lamb before Jeudy, but then Jeudy not only falling that
past
far.
Rager.
But then Rager, yeah.
Finally getting that weapon
Dude,
for Brady.
What would Philadelphia do? Like, what would fans do if, like, there would just be so much. There would be so much conversation about
we've seen
how do you
before.
pass on Jeudy? How do you pass on Jeudy? But Jeudy falling out is a spite. That's why I love Josh. Josh is not afraid to put something spicy like that into his mock drafts and kind of put it out there. I thought that was very interesting.
Something's going to happen. I mean, we need.
Does happen every year.
Is there some other quality that's more redeeming that's leaping these guys above Jerry Jeudy? Like CeeDee Lamb and Jalen Reagor above Jerry Jeudy. What is the redeeming quality?
What are the knocks on Jeudy? The knocks on Jeudy are his size and build. He's sub 190. He's a little bit of a more frailer frame. Yeah. And every once in a while, he's got some bad drops. That might be it, right?
Hope you're watching the YouTube.
That might be it.
So
like Joe Marino put out a big board earlier.
Yeah.
CeeDee Lamb above Jeudy.
Right. I know. Yeah, that's a prevailing. I like Jeudy. I think of the group over everybody else, but I don't know.
Let Jeudy be like the 4th receiver off the board and give this guy a chip on his shoulder in the NFL. Like,
yes, exactly. No question.
No Kenneth Murray in round 1.
No Kenneth Murray in round 1. He seems to be a kind of a darling to go early in most mock drafts. That's a good one. C-Mac, I know you had a point that you want to hit on as well.
We talked about the receivers, and there's 5 that go in the first round. I think Denzel Mims does make it into Norris's mock here toward the end. 6 corners, more corners end up going. We're not talking enough about the depth at corner in this class. You mentioned Jalen Johnson. That's not a name you're seeing in too many mock drafts. But for all this, how many receivers are going to go off the board? More corners are going off the board. So that's why when I brought up the point about moving up for a guy, it may not just be at wide receiver. It could be a position like corner, depending how, for the Eagles, maybe how free agency shakes out.
It's going to be a big corner gap in the draft. I'm calling it now. It's like 5 or 6 in the first round. You might not see like any in round 2.
Interesting.
And then again on day 3 there'll be a bunch.
I'm putting
there's kind of just like a weird disconnect of like top end guys and then some intriguing kind of talent and developmental guys.
We'll wrap it up. I think that receiver, we typically have seen, outside of that Corey Davis, Mike Williams, John Ross here, receivers I feel like go a little bit later than people think. For the most part, when it's all said and done. Happened with Calvin Ridley. It happened with a number of guys over the last few years where they go just a little bit later than they were in mock drafts. But good conversations there, guys. Let's go into our next segment here. It's time now for Pick 6.
Now it's time for Pick 6.
All right, guys, so for Pick 6 this week, I wanted to do 6 NFL comparisons, 6 player comparisons that we all love. Like, the player comparisons can be tough sometimes. It's not always easy to kind of project, a college player to an NFL player. But let's pick 6 that we all feel really, really good about. Ben, I'll let you kick us off here for this one.
Well, there's been a bunch we've thrown out, over the last calendar year that I think we've both kind of darlinged about. The C.J. Henderson, the Dominique Rodgers-Cromartie.
Yep, you love that
we
one.
both felt pretty good about that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, I finished him up yesterday.
This was the one I think is yours.
I just think we said Brian Westbrook earlier in the season. We were watching together. A lot of people have given the Mark Ingram profile. I just think he's much shiftier, much quicker-footed, much more of an upside in the pass game, much like a Brian Westbrook coming out of Villanova, what he did with Andy Reid. If he gets into a West Coast system or somebody that really takes advantage of these scat backs on third down, man, look out for a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. But Brian Westbrook, and like I was just saying before, Joe Reed, Virginia, reminds me a lot of Randall Cobb. That type of role, kick returner, wildcat stuff, slot receiver, vertical threat, yards after catch. Those are a couple that I really like.
I like that one. C-Mac, what do you got for us?
So I'm going to go with the star name to first, the big name guy, and I look at Tristan Wirfs. I was intrigued by some of the top offensive tackles out there. How about Trent Williams? Okay, the currently with Washington, but is on the trade market. When you look at the size and weight, almost identical. Trent Williams put up quite an athletic workout when he tested at the combine. Not quite as good as Wirfs, but pretty comparable. If you could find someone of that size, and I just think about how how Trent Williams has been given the Eagles, fits over the years, and I just think about with the Giants at that number 4 pick, if they're looking to go offensive line, I'm like, could Tristan Wirfs be a guy who gives the Eagles issues now for the next decade?
Wirfs just reminded me of my comp for him was actually a previous Redskins tackle in Chris Samuels. 10-year vet, obviously a really good player coming out of Alabama there. Just a bit of a throwback kind of style on the field, almost like the way Whitworth plays. Really athletic, does some freaky athletic things, but his play profile is just a little bit more of a mauler throwback. But obviously tested through the roof and looked really athletic and has some God-given abilities.
So I'm going to go with one at the wide receiver position that, I remember you and I talked about this in the summer, and I was kind of hashing through. I had just got done watching CeeDee Lamb for the first time. This was like May, June. I think it was right when I got back from paternity leave. Okay, so I get back, I watch CeeDee Lamb, and I'm like, man, I'm texting back and forth with Ben. I'm like, hey, this is how I feel. Good stuff. I went through all the positives. At first, I thought he kind of reminds me of an Odell Beckham, but he's not as twitchy. He's not as explosive. He's not that kind. And I keep talking through, and I was like, you know what? He kind of reminds me of DeAndre Hopkins. And it's starting to gain a little bit more steam now. But I think when you look at CeeDee Lamb, what is it about him what makes CeeDee Lamb so great? His ball skills, his hands, his competitiveness, and his toughness. DeAndre Hopkins is not. He's gotten better. He was not the sharpest route runner coming out of Clemson. He was not a 4.4 guy, 4.3 guy coming out of Clemson. He was not a guy that you were going to say, man, look at just how much of a technician he is off the line of scrimmage and press. He wasn't. He's not the biggest guy. He wasn't 6'3", 6'4", but he's 6'1". He'll go up and fight with anybody at the catch point. And tough after the catch, but not dynamic. That's kind of how I view CeeDee Lamb. And if he's DeAndre Hopkins, every team would take DeAndre Hopkins. But I think to me, that's the comparison that I've kind of latched myself onto. I like the CeeDee Lamb to Nuke Hopkins.
Yeah, I like that a lot. 3 quick points. He had a one-handed catch, I think, against UCLA last year along the sideline started the Nuke Hopkins kind of train because it looked exactly like the way Hopkins works the sideline, one-handed catches. The one thing I see similarities is their release packages. Dynamic releases coming off the line of scrimmage, but not the best route runners. The one thing I think that separates them, CeeDee Lamb, yards after catch, the returner profile, exceptional. He can get himself out of a phone booth like Houdini, something that DeAndre Hopkins really didn't do well at Clemson or with the Texans, really. More of a catch point, down the field guy. Did have that one slip screen touchdown against the Seahawks, I think 2 years ago. But other than that, really not a yak guy like CeeDee Lamb is.
I don't know if Lamb, obviously if Lamb had been in the SEC, would those yak numbers have looked the same? The Big 12 defense,
a little extra space out there, I've seen.
A little more space to work with.
Some of those plays against Texas, though, there's 5 guys around him.
Yeah, he gets out of a phone booth crazy. I agree with you. C-Mac, what's your second one?
My other one, I wanted to go not a top-tier first-round guy, so slightly off the beaten path. But this is a guy we saw at the Senior Bowl, and this is a guy who we're trying to figure out where does he project to the next level. And that's Antonio Gibson out of Memphis, okay? I'll give a hat tip to Mike Renner, Bachelor of Fame, Pro Football Focus, tremendous finale last night, by the way, for those who watched. Okay, I know you guys didn't, but it's fine.
True.
He threw out Ty Montgomery of the Green Bay Packers from a role standpoint of trying to figure out, because what has Ty Montgomery been at the NFL? He's been a mix of running back, he's been a mix of wide receiver. Antonio Gibson, that's what I think teams are going to have to figure out. And I think he's a fun player to utilize to be able to figure that out with. But when you're trying to figure out how does he project, that's sort of the initial thought process. I thought that was very interesting.
I think McCarthy got caught with too many versatile players because you had Randall Cobb that took over the wildcat option back stuff, the slot receiver, and then you had Ty Montgomery. You didn't really know what he was coming out of Stanford. Slot receiver, did some wildcat stuff, did some returning abilities, but you already had Cobb there. So Montgomery tried to find his way as a receiver, then ended up just being a pure running back later in his career. And I think now, looking at the Deebo Samuels and the way Christian McCaffrey's really excelled out of the backfield, you can't put these guys into molds, and you really have to be able to just ebb and flow to their abilities. And I think a guy like Antonio Gibson, I don't even know what he is. Is he a slot? Is he a receiver? Is he a running back? I'm calling him a receiver. He played in the slot about 79% this past year, 12% in the backfield. So for now, he's a receiver. But a lot of ability there. And like I have written down, Antonio Gibson / Joe Reed. There's tons of these types of players in this draft. And I think Debo's ability with the 49ers is put a light bulb on to a lot of offensive coordinators.
No question. My last one is a guy that I love. I think most people have day two. I love this player, and that's Jordan Elliott, the defensive tackle from Missouri. I see a guy at 6'4". He was listed 325. He came in a little bit lighter at the combine. I think he was like 306, 310, like somewhere in that range. He can win with power. He can win with quickness. He can win with technique. He can win with motor. He like really, really impressive physical talent. He reminds me of Akeem Hicks. Like Akeem Hicks was not Akeem Hicks coming out because he went to Laval up in Canada. He was at the Shrine Bowl. Took some time to develop. He started in New Orleans, then went up to New England, and then now he's in Chicago and is one of the best defensive tackles.
Regina.
Regina is where he
yes,
went.
You are. That's correct. I know he was up there in Canada somewhere. But you look at Akeem Hicks to Jordan Elliott. I think Elliott has that same kind of upside. He can win in multiple ways. Love his power. I love his quickness. Violent with his hands. This guy, when he gets to the quarterback, like he gets there with bad intentions.
Did you talk to him in Indy?
A little bit more of a soft-spoken guy.
Okay.
I'd like to be able to spend more time with him. We can't. Unfortunately,
I don't know anything about
him.
I don't think I've heard an interview.
Yeah,
but I know obviously the Texas transfer and highly
Texas
touted recruit.
transfer. I'm excited to kind of dig more into Jordan Elliott, but man, like his film is really, really impressive.
I've written down. I think I wrote down Sheldon Richardson and Marcel Darius.
Okay.
So guys a little bit more fleeter foot than
first-round picks.
than Akeem Hicks, but that type of play profile. Really quick, a couple other ones I love. Kenneth Murray to Keith Bullock.
Love that
Justin
one,
Jefferson, Keenan Allen, Xavier McKinney to our own Malcolm Jenkins. I think he's going to be playing in the league for 12 years.
You guys did a great job of throwing a bunch of these throughout the fall and even in the build up to the draft. That it was almost like, all right, which I know Ben's got on this one a number of times. I know Fran's gone this one a couple times.
I'm big on it just to kind of give you a snapshot of their ability, their skill set, their potential role, not predicting a career, not predicting anything that these guys have done, but what could it look like if it all goes well type of thing, and just trying to paint that picture for fans. And it's always fun going back through our Rolodex of players.
No question. Well, it's a fun conversation. I actually dove into a little bit with Josh Norris and Dane Brugler this week on the Eagle Eye in the Sky podcast, fueled by Gatorade, so make sure you go check that out. Really fun conversation with those two guys over there on that show this week. All right, let's wrap the show up. It's time now for Draft Mailbag.
Now it's time to hear from you, the fans, in the Draft Mailbag.
All right, so as always, the best way to support this show is to go on to Apple Podcasts or Stitcher, wherever you listen. Leave us a rating, leave us a comment. And I want to give a shout out to a couple people that did just that. The Biggest Cat left a 4-star review saying how much they enjoy the insight on players all around the country. We appreciate that, The Biggest Cat. Sorry it was not a 5-star review, but we'll forgive you on that one.
My fault for that.
PTG Productions left a 5-star review saying, awesome podcast, gives you prospect info all year long. It's great to listen to them, to follow along these kids that they've been talking about all year. Really appreciate that, PTG. And then a good question here with a mock draft from the Scout Stout. 5-star review. Hi, guys, another mock draft, but this time with a trade up. We give up our 2nd-round pick and swap firsts with the Colts. So here's the mock draft. 1st-round pick, the trade up with the Colts for wide receiver Jerry Jeudy. So we just talked about this earlier. Jeudy falling a little bit into the mid-teens. Is he a guy
in
that's
Norris's scenario, he'd fall to us. We won't have to move anywhere.
We don't have to move anywhere. I would say 99% of mock drafts do not have that happening. But no, with Jerry Jeudy falling into the mid-teens and moving up there, I think fans would be pretty juiced about it.
I'll take a Jerry Jeudy in Philadelphia.
Yeah, I think fans
would be happy with that one.
No question.
What number would he wear?
Ooh, what number would he wear? That's a good question. All right, so no second round picks. So you go to the third round. Jeremy Chin in the third round. He might go earlier than that now, man. We talked about him last week, a guy that really helped himself at the Senior Bowl, goes to the Combine, blows that out of the water.
I mean, he leapfrogged Kyle Duggar on DJ's.
Did he really? I didn't even make that connection.
Duggar was in the top 50.
Oh, and he loves Duggar.
Out.
They're two really, really good players.
Yeah.
Don't scout the helmet on these guys.
Yep.
They're big, long, physical. I'm telling you, Jeremy Chin looks like Isaiah Simmons without the helmet on.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Like I said, I was late coming around on Chin.
And I need to double check. I'm pretty sure you put Chin as a linebacker now.
Yeah.
Which Isaiah Simmons, linebacker, similar mold.
Sure, what is
he?
It's very interesting. Fourth round, Nick Harris, the center from Washington. Look, I think when you watch the film on him, he certainly schematically fits. I mean, he played center. He played a little bit of guard, but I think he's got a center build, really known for his athleticism, his ability to get out in space. And, he was asked at the Combine numerous times about comparisons to Jason Kelce. And he talked about, I've watched a lot of Jason Kelce film.
Getting up to the second level, screen game, that's a perfect little protege mentor.
Fourth round pick as well. Akeem Davis-Gaither, the linebacker from App State. A lot of Senior Bowl guys here, which we love. Akeem Davis-Gaither in the fourth round. Dane Jackson, the corner from Pitt. I've compared him in the past to Jalen Mills. I think there's a lot of similarities there in terms of the way that they play. Fifth round, Devin Duvernay, the wide receiver from Texas. Slot, inside, outside, kick return, tough kid. Yards after catch. I like a Devin
He's another
Duvernay.
one that just stayed level through the conversation of draft season, and other guys have kind of leapfrogged. He's done nothing wrong. He ran out of the building. He's a great slot receiver. I just watched his tape. I didn't realize they put him in the backfield on Wildcat stuff.
Yep.
Does everything all these other gadget players do. It's just a deep class.
He's built like Debo. He's got that lower half.
He's got the running back build to
no
him.
question.
Yeah.
I like Devin Duvernay a lot. Julian Blackman. I'll tell you one thing about Julian Blackman. He's the fifth round pick here for the Scouts Stout. Free safety from Utah, former corner, made the move to safety this past year. Talking to those guys for that Utah defense, he was the leader. He was the guy that called the shots on that group. Was when he got hurt in the Pac-12 title game, or I think it was the week before the Pac-12 title game. Those guys all point to that and saying losing Julian Blackman was a big deal for us. Going into that, and they lost to Oregon. It was a tough loss. They would have gone to the playoff, but they to a man they'll say losing Julian was really, really difficult for us.
They might have 8 players drafted just on defense. And we might be talking about 15 players drafted in the last 2 years from Utah.
That's
with
insane.
all those linebackers and Cody Barton and those guys.
He's doing an unbelievable job putting him not just recruiting but developing.
I mean, Javelin Guidry. We're talking about Terrell Burgess maybe being a day 2 player now. Obviously, Lekki Fotu, Bradley Anai, Francis Bernard's really gained steam in the linebacker community.
No question. And speaking of, sixth round
Bernard,
pick, Francis Bernard.
Utah.
I love Francis Bernard. He's a guy that I'm really excited about. Potential 3-down linebacker at the next level with what he's been able to do. Former starter at BYU, transferred over to Utah, sat behind a couple draft picks from a year ago, and then took over as a starter as a senior and did really well. Went to the Senior Bowl, had a good week. Solid workout at the Combine. He got hurt midway through, so what he did do was good.
There's some speedy linebackers in this draft.
Yeah.
The Willie Gays, the Akeem Davis-Gaithers. There's some massive linebackers. Malik Harrison, Kenneth Murray.
Yep.
He's kind of the mix of everything, and I think that still needs to be coveted.
Yep. I spent a good amount of time with him in Mobile. I spent 7-8 minutes with him. Just came away liking him. He's got a little bit of an edge to him, but
I
came away liking him. And the last one, sixth round, Antonio Gandy Golden, wide receiver from Liberty.
Great value.
Where do you think he goes when it's all said and done?
Probably right here in the sixth round. It's just such a deep receiver group, but he's big, he's long, he's tall. I don't know what he ran in Indy. What he ran?
Would it surprise you
if
he went 4.6? Third round? He went 4.6 even.
That's kind of what he is, though.
Yeah.
I mean,
would it shock you if he went the end of day 2?
Yes, I think it would.
Interesting.
I just don't think he has the tremendous upside. He's a bit of a catch point guy. He doesn't have the gadget ability like those other guys I kind of was talking about with being inside, outside, returner, backfield stuff.
Sure.
So a little bit more limited with his play profile.
No, he was great. I remember in the run blocking drills at the Senior Bowl.
I mean, where do you put Michael Pittman? Where do you put Colin Johnson?
I know.
I can't find spots for him on day 2. There's going to be some really good players on day 3.
That's why Chase Claypool was right in that group, and then he went and blew up the Combine, and now everyone's talking about him in
But is Claypool playing special teams for you? Probably, right?
He has to. Yeah,
Michael Pittman's playing special teams.
Michael Pittman's a
I
special
don't know
teams
if
player.
Andy Golden's playing special teams for you.
I asked him at the Senior Bowl, and he had never played any special
Right.
teams.
So these are the types of things that
Yes.
are in the pecking order
Yep.
that matters.
Yeah.
Do we care
Good
about
point.
punt gunning? Absolutely not. But when we have to decide between our receiver 12 and receiver 13, who can do more for your team?
Yep. Well, it's a very, very good point. Well, we're going to wrap the show up on that. Really, really good stuff there. Appreciate that from the Scouts Out, from the Biggest Cat, PTG Productions. Hopefully, Biggest Cat, you can give us a little bit of a bump up to a 5-star review. But appreciate everybody that has done that over the last few weeks. We're continuing to get a really good inflow of ratings on there. And again, all those comments, they help boost us up in the rankings, let more people find the show. So appreciate everybody that has done that over the last few weeks. All that being said, we'll talk to you next week here on the Journey to the Draft podcast, driven by AAA.